Hi, it's Chris. Welcome back to this month's edition of Spirit Talk. This is August 2016. Our guest this month holds a doctorate degree in clinical psychology, and he's worked as a psychologist in corrections, both as a clinician and supervisor for over 20 years. Now, following several life-changing experiences, he's adamantly studied the topic of near-death experience. A book also followed his immersion, Psychology in Near-Death Experiences, Searching for God, published by White Crow Books. Following his mission and passion, he enjoys sharing his experiences with others and is currently writing more books on the near-death experience phenomenon. Now, our guest currently resides in Colorado with his wife and son, and when he's not writing, he is expressing his creativity and interests by other means, such as hiking, photography, or tinkering on the piano. Please welcome to the show, Roy Hill. Welcome, Roy.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here today.
Well, thanks for coming on. Today we're going to be discussing your theory on near-death experience and how it relates to consciousness. Now, most people on my show know about near-death experiences, but I get occasional that don't. So, first off, what is a near-death experience?
Well, it's a separation of our consciousness from our body, and it occurs either during death or coma. So beyond that, there's some variability depending on how long somebody has passed away or what types of things they're meant to see. At least that's my belief. So oftentimes there's an out-of-body experience where the person sees themselves either in an operating table or lying, deceased somewhere. And then there is a transportation to either another dimensional area or another place or both, where a person who's deceased, if they get that far, will meet deceased loved ones or have other types of experiences. Often at the end, they're told that they have to come back, and so they do.
Most people that have had a near-death experience, obviously that becomes a part of their life, and they go around researching it as well, sharing their stories. Now, how did you become interested in NDEs?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, I come from a rather traditional Christian background and was raised Baptist, but my mom and dad and my brother are all hard scientists, kind of the black sheep that went into the social sciences. But still, I came from a very materialistic, scientific background with this kind of added oddness of also being spiritual in a sense, in a traditional sense. So about 16 years ago, I was working at a federal prison as a psychologist, and I had an inmate whose deceased sister had recently passed, and I knew he was a kind of a vulnerable person. So I talked to him, and indeed, he was depressed, suicidal, so I placed him on suicide watch. After I placed him on watch, after a couple of days, he was better, and it was a bit rapid for my understanding. And my question in my mind was, why now? So he said that my deceased sister was talking to me and that she was trying to help me. She was allowed to come for a brief time. And that she's telling me that I have a lot of important things I need to do in life, and being here on suicide watch is not one of them. Now, I thought, well, this inmate's talking to the deceased sister. He may be psychotic. And I thought about it. I said, well, all the psychotic people I haven't worked with, schizophrenics or other forms of psychotic disorders, their auditory hallucinations are short, shallow, cryptic, and negative. They're never helpful. And all this was the exact opposite. So based on his mental status, he was eating well, looked good in terms of mental status. I took him off watch under the observations of the officers. So I talked to him in the next morning, and I asked him, if his deceased sister was still talking to him. He said, yes. And I said, well, what is she telling you? He goes, well, she's telling me you don't believe me. And so you shall believe he's got a message for you. Yeah, I know. It's like goosebumps. It's like, this is very odd. Certainly outside of my normal, experiences. So I reluctantly, but the curiosity got the better of me, said, well, what is she telling you? What's my message? And he said, quarter. A quarter? What does that mean? Like quarter of something, quarter of the coin? I said, I don't know. So he kind of talks to this deceased sister on the other side, and they're sitting waiting patiently in the silence. And then he comes back and says, well, quarter of the coin. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, I don't know. So he leaves, and I get this other guy come in next, and he's a white Muslim, doesn't hang out with the other guy, different circles completely. And he's ranting about the hypocrisy of the United States, and probably a little ways in, I'm half listening. He says, Dr. Hill, do you know what's written on a quarter? I said, in God we trust. He goes, that's right. And then dawned at me, like, wow, nobody's asked that of me before or since. So I had to get the other guy back in. I said, did your deceased sister say anything else to you? He goes, yeah. He says that she's telling me that your wife's friend, you're going to have a son, and he'll be born on Christmas Day. Mm. Wow, that's rather specific. Well, the first two things were true. I knew it to be true. It's possible he overheard it from staff, although unlikely. Staff aren't supposed to talk about other staff or inmates. But, who knows? So would my son be born on Christmas Day? Well, he was born on January 7th. And if you go forward another 11 years, I was here at an institution in Colorado, and it bothered me that the first stuff sounded so true and interesting, but the last part wasn't true, because everybody knows Christmas is December 25th. Then I had this epiphany. Like, well, first there was a declaration in have faith. And second, there was a statement I needed to have trust in God. So maybe this is a test of faith. So in a leap of faith, I Googled Christmas Day on January 7th. And lo and behold, a lot of stuff came up. Turns out we use the Julian calendar, the Roman calendar. But that hasn't always been so. Christendom used to use the Christian calendar, or the Gregorian calendar, which the Russian Greek Orthodox churches and half a billion Christians still use the Gregorian calendar. So according to this Gregorian Christian calendar, Christmas Day is January 7th. Wow, yeah, exactly. And so I couldn't ignore all that, and so I had to wrap my scientific mind around that. I talked to a couple of Christian friends, and they said, Doc, this is probably just the devil talking. I knew it wasn't the devil, because the devil wouldn't be saying to trust in God. Right. So I knew about near-death experiences. I read Raymond Moody's book a long time ago. Yeah, me too, yeah. And, a lot of people have. He was a great pioneer. Life after life, Yeah, that's right, life after life. And so I knew about the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation website, where they at the time had about 3,000 anonymous near-death experiences on their website. And so I started reading them voraciously. Then I started corresponding with Jody Long, wife of Jeff Long and Jody Long. Some of you who know near-death experiences are pretty famous in the field. They started corresponding with me, and Jody Long encouraged me to write a book. And so that's how that happened. And since then, it's been one thing after another of different things happening in my life, and synchronicities and openness to spiritual events and that sort of thing. So that's how I got into it initially. That's fantastic. We've had on, in the past, we've had Raymond Moody on. We've had Betty Eady, Daniel Brinkley, and a couple others that have shared their experiences. I've been personally studying near-death experiences since the early 90s because I became fascinated, and I ended up having some out-of-body experiences that I was looking for explanations. And so I became fascinated by that. In your book, Psychology and Near-Death Experiences, Searching for God, you devote a large section in your book talking about the soul. And people have speculated about the nature of soul for over thousands of years. Can you describe some attributes that you've discovered about the soul? Well, since you bring up the issue of soul and consciousness, I would say that those two are very much integrally linked.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know what our soul is and how you get in touch with it, it's our consciousness. And I say that because for several reasons. One, it's the true sense of who you are. It's the I am within you. And neurology has not found anywhere in the brain that explains consciousness. Now,
Correct.
there's a lot of theories about consciousness and how it may be derived from the brain. And certainly there's an assumption from materialists that it has to come from the brain, yet nobody's found where it comes from. So I do believe, as Carl Jung believed, that consciousness is the same as our soul. And so there's a merging, basically, of a biological organism and a soul. Now, the soul, interestingly enough, is more than just this individual spirit of ours. Where does the soul come from? Well, many spiritual people would say, well, it comes from God. And I would add to that, it's more than it coming from God. It is God, in a sense. It is expression of God, but in a way that our individuality is a gift from God, that we become our own individuals, which is a bit of an illusion, because in reality, we're all part of God. If you can imagine a big fire where there's smoke, if you could capture just a little bit of that smoke and put it within you, that would be an analogy of capturing a little bit of God's essence and putting within you. Or if you dropped a big pane of glass on the pavement and it shattered into a million pieces, in this case probably trillions of pieces, you and I are just a shard of that glass,
Correct.
which is of God. That doesn't mean that you and I are God, but we are of God, and that's an important difference. I certainly, with all my faults and limitations, am not God, but I'm a little part of God.
I agree with you 100%. It's something I've been discussing for many years regarding the apple principle, discussed by Deepak Chopra, saying the apple,
Yes.
you cut it into a million pieces, you take 1/1,000,000th of the piece, even though that individual piece has a different facet, different texture, different cut to it, it is still a part of the whole, a part of the apple. And that one little piece represents us, but also represents that collectively we are the apple.
And in Hindu spirituality and religion, they use the analogy of the drop going into the ocean and back to the ocean. So yet another way for people to visualize what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Roy, there's something I'm going to share with you, and I was hesitant to bring this up. I was going to make it another podcast. But you just touched on something right here that I'd like to share with you, and we're going to go into more of your discussion and your interpretations and research. And I think this is important, is I had an experience July 23rd, 2016. And for those that don't know, back in 2009, I suffered a car crash. I was rear-ended, suffered a concussion, lost basically 5 days of memory. And since then, I've been suffering from chronic neck pain, been on many different medications, therapies, doctors, you name it. And clinically, I have what's called a TBI, traumatic brain injury. In that brain injury, there tends to be sometimes slow memory recall or forgetting certain dates, those types of things. But my cognitive functions fluctuate in choosing aphasia, choosing the wrong words, this and that. So anyway, my point is that I don't have hallucinations. I don't have any of those types of things. However, different medications have caused, of course, different side effects. But in dealing with the pain, I decided 2 months ago, even though I've been against drugs, pharmaceuticals, and many things, one of the coping things I needed because the pain was getting so severe was to get a medical license to take cannabis.
Mm.
And in taking medical cannabis, the vapors, not much of an effect. What I have found, and in discussion with other people have had similar experiences, somewhat similar experiences, is the cannabis oil. On 2 occasions, I have had, well, 3, I should say. I have had dramatic conscious experiences. And the one on July 23rd, 2016, because I was drinking as well as taking the oil, I started shifting out of my body consciously. What I want to share with you goes along with what you just said. I was finding myself, I had parked on a 5th floor garage. I was downtown in the city. I went to a party. Unfortunately, I drank more than I should have, but I was also on the cannabis to deal with the pain, and I saw myself shifting consciously from person to person, shifting out of my body. So I decided to remove myself from the day party, and I sat in the garage on the 5th floor. I was shifting down to the 4th floor, to the 6th floor, consciously while my body remained in my truck. It was uncontrollable. I found out that, and I found this out over many years, that when people are under the influence, are not in complete control of mind, body, and spirit, the consciousness will sometimes shift out, or other forces will sometimes try to shift in and take over, such as possession or attachments. In this particular situation, I calmed myself down and I said, please, God, how can I control my consciousness? I don't want to be shifting out of my body like this. Is very scary. How do I control it? All of a sudden, I heard a voice state to me, and I wrote this down in my journal, and I'm reading this to you now. I am consciousness. You are me. You are you. Together we are. All of a sudden, I see this blackness, and I see this frequency that shoots across the blackness, kind of like a sound wave, an audio wave, but also similar to a lightning bolt. This frequency contains the Creator. And within that, as the timeline from what we consider time and space, but there is no time and space, I start seeing, as I zoomed in on this frequency, timelines. I start seeing civilizations. And as the frequencies like lightning bolts shot off of this horizontal line, it began to fill in the space in all different possibilities, all different ways, all different cultures, generations, people, everything. And the more I zoomed in, I saw individuals that were a part of this frequency. Yet this frequency was all connected from the Creator, who stated, I am the Alpha, I am the Omega. I am the beginning, I am the end. And as I watched this occur, it caught up to my timeline, my life, but then also I saw all possibilities. As when I would come to certain decisions in my life, I would hone in on one decision and follow that, yet all those other possibilities that I was considering also took off in alternate realities, and they were occurring. As this frequency began to fill up, I saw this section like a cube. It completely filled up the cube. Then the cube expanded. And the voice said to me that, I am the Alpha, I am the Omega. All possibilities in a certain sequence occur, and they branch off in other sequences and other alternate realities, so that I may experience all things and that you may experience all things. Once all things have mathematically been experienced, it collapses and starts over again, but in a different sequence. To me, Roy, it was incredible. It was incredible to experience this, and I've had a few other experiences about a hour later, where I was allowed and able to access these alternate realities, these other decisions, briefly, and then come back and then realize that consciously we can access all of this, but it can cause problems within our path and destiny. But yet the Creator experiences and knows all things with us.
Yes.
Whew.
Well, amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And there's so many topics. As you were relaying your experience, I was thinking, wow, we could talk about that. Oh, wow, we could talk about this. We could talk for hours about just what you shared, I think, here. So very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, I want to compliment it for your own experience and your own research, because you pose those questions, but also you're explaining things that go along with what I just experienced.
I try to, yes.
Yeah, so I ask you this: how can we increase our awareness of our soul nature?
Well, we're all going to have limitations here on Earth. I think that one of our biggest tasks here on Earth is to increase our soul awareness, because many people are living as animal humans to a greater extent than spirit. I say this because you look at the world around you. You go to, like, let's say, any grocery store, and you see magazines. What do you see? You see maybe one news magazine, one science magazine, one knitting magazine or cooking or something like that. Then you see dozens of men's magazines where they have scantily dressed women, or women's magazines for kind of like a women's pornography by word. You have gun magazines, muscle magazines, car magazines, money magazines. Everything except for maybe a few magazines is about power, sex, and power and sex, pretty much it. The Freudid, as if you go back to introductory psychology. And these are the things that we have evolved with, evolution. We're a violent sexual species going way back. But remember, I said that the soul or consciousness becomes integrated with this body. And it's not to deny our animal nature, because we can't, and nor do we need to. But the idea is to elevate the spirit above the body. And in my book, there's several ways to do that. One, we need to focus more on our consciousness. Do this through mindfulness, through metacognition, thinking about our own thinking, or mindfulness, shutting everything out. That's very similar to meditation. And intuition, and also connecting with the source. And, and certainly striving towards integrity is part of this as well, because when you do that, you're focusing, I think, inward onto the self instead of all the stuff around you. And you're focusing on elevating yourself above. And let me relate that last point to perhaps the most important point. People who have near-death experiences, say, have a mission. They may involve 1, 2, 3, 4 key things we're supposed to learn here on school Earth. In your own experience, you talked about all the possibilities. And this is very consistent with near-death experiences. Up in heaven, our home, there's no death, there is no conflict, there is no sickness, and we're all plugged in and interconnected to this wonderful bliss and peace and love. So what a great place to feel this bliss, but it's not a great place to become individuals, to become who we choose to be through the gift of free will, through that little shard of glass becoming its own, even though underneath it's part of God consciousness. So to learn these things, we have to come to Earth. It's the difference between studying to be, I'm a psychologist, studying to be a psychologist and actually doing therapy. One is very different than the other. I can study all I want, but until I actually do it, that studying is limited. And same with spiritual beings. They can study what it means to be human all they want. They can learn, but to actually become it, they have to come down and do it. And so discovering our mission is very important to get in touch with the soul. So just to recap, you can get in touch with your soul through being mindful of your own consciousness and tuning things out, to think about your own thinking, which will help people then understand that there is a higher level of being that one can get through intuition and through experience, through integrity, and also by being consistent with their God-given mission. And all that brings us to the meaning of life, if I may.
Yeah.
Thousands of years, people will say, well, what is the meaning of life? Well, according to near-death experiencers, I have the answer for you today on this program. So here it is.
Right.
Thousands of years come to this point right now and here.
People out there listening that are struggling or trying to find purpose in their lives, you've stated
Absolutely.
right here is to connect with that and to find out what the meaning of life is. You need to understand mindfulness. You need to understand controlling your thoughts, meditating, paying attention to your intuition, connecting with the source, and following a form of integrity that doesn't go into always this ego, this sex, this power, and domination of other beings, but having an integrity that frequency, that vibration will allow you to connect with the higher source, and then by doing that and following that, you elevate above spiritually.
Absolutely. And so if we want to sum this all together into the meaning of life, here's what it is. The meaning of life is to learn what we lack in love. That's it.
I'm going to write that down.
Very simple.
Learn what we lack
in love.
And love. Such as when we take a look at creative expression, is follow some of the things that you love, as long as that creative expression is not dominating somebody else or hurting somebody else or putting down someone else, because that's really not creative expression.
Correct.
That's taking advantage.
That would be one example.
Yeah.
Now, love it sounds very simple, but this is anything but simple. In fact, this is so complex that it takes much more than a lifetime to learn. You talked about all these infinite possibilities. It takes going through all these possibilities to learn and elevate to the full extent. Okay, so I want people to think not of love as a feeling, but rather many, many skill sets, difficult skill sets. For example, forgiveness, a wonderful attribute of love. It's not so hard to forgive a friend who said an offhand joke that hurt your feelings, especially if they apologize. But what about if, let's say, you're married to a woman or man or whoever, and they, out of the blue, say, screw you, I'm taking all my stuff, taking all your stuff, and you can go jump in the lake, and you're sitting there heartbroken. Okay? That takes a lot of skill and ability to forgive. Take another attribute of love, sacrifice. One thing to go to your buddy who needs to move his furniture from one place to another, take an afternoon and help him move it. It takes a little bit of sacrifice. That's a good thing. But what about quitting your job to take care of an elderly parent who has Alzheimer's disease and caretaking them for the next 2 or 3 years while you watch them lose their faculties until they die? Now that is sacrifice. These are the hard lessons of love that we lack, that we need to learn. And you can go on about inherent respect, humility, on and on and on. And so this is why we come to Earth, is to evolve, to become a higher vibration, as you said. But we do that out of love. When people have life reviews during their near-death experience, they have a review of certain things more than others. There's a woman who you may want to have in your show, Erica McKenzie, who has a book out. Mm-hmm. During her near-death experience, her life review was like a movie theater where the curtains open, and it said 3, 2, 1, and she could hear like an old-time reel going. And so it opens up, and she sees her life and all the things that she did, her graduating, her awards or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so the curtains close. And then God told her, there's some glasses, I want you to put those on. They're huge. She's like, yeah, those won't fit. She says, no, put them on. So she did, and they fit perfectly. And they were the God glasses. So she says, you're going to have another life review. So the same thing, the curtains open, 3, 2, 1. This time, she had a life review from God's point of view. And it was all the times that she loved. That's all God was concerned about. how much she loved other people. She had her review from her point of view and a God review that was based on, did you love? And so that is really the center of what it's all about.
Yeah. You say that every person has, one or more primary lessons to learn in life. How do we really know which lessons have been assigned to us?
Great question. Thank you. Even when people have their life review during a near-death experience and come back, they're often not told what their specific mission is. And that's important because we're co-creating in this, and there's free will involved. And this goes into a lot of complicated issues, such as time. When you explained your own experience, there was a timelessness, a relative time in heaven where the past, future, and present were pretty fuzzy. Time is a singularity, is what you experienced, and that's how it's experienced in heaven. We don't have that here on Earth. We have linear time where it's a continuous flow of now forward, and that's it. And that's designed for a reason, because with a short life, with time going forward, it makes us prioritize what we choose to be. And choice is at the center of it all. There's not enough time to do everything, so you got to choose who and what you're going to become. And in a sense, we kind of choose our own mission, even though, ironically, before we were born, great thought has been put into the life that we were going to come to learn the lessons that's been assigned to us. But yeah, on Earth, it's blocked because we're supposed to do it through free will. So there's a little bit of a paradox there. But to answer the heart of your question about that, we will find our mission because it will come to us. We were placed in the family, the environment, the culture, the religion, the people who we were designed to meet in life, where we will find our mission. Our mission will come to us. The important thing is that we are living our mission in every moment. Every moment you choose to love, you're fulfilling your mission in some form. And the challenges you're going to face are probably going to be related to your mission. Mm-hmm. All we have to do is to be open and try to love. That's it. We have to understand it all. We're not meant to understand it all. Because that would be taking away our free will. If we're told, well, this is our mission, I got to try it here, I got to do this, I got to do that. There's no got to. You have to want to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, in the same sense, it is confusing because I understand the paradox that, if we told you exactly what you're supposed to do, you would either race out there and do it, or you take your sweet time and do it whenever you need to do it, instead of using the free will and the synchronized events we have lined up. It'll get messed up. But in the same sense, you get frustrated because, I give you an example. One of my out-of-body experiences I had, and it's when I try to tell people it was 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't even know how long ago it was. I mean, it was definitely over to 8, 10 years ago, but I can't place the exact date it occurred. I guess it doesn't matter. But what occurred was, I was on the other side. There was a spirit there, and I said, I'm home. I'm not going back. And the spirit says, are you sure? I said, yeah, I don't want to go back. He goes, well, we need you to go back. I said, I'm not going back. And I started laughing at him. I said, I know how it works. Because, I had this intelligence on the other side. You have this all-knowingness. And I said, I know how it works. You can't make me go back. He's like, you're right, I can't. I said, I've got my free will, so I can stay. He's like, you're right. And so I start smiling, and I cross my arms. I'm like, and I start, smiling, and I say, there's nothing you can do to make me go back. He says, well, I was hoping you'd say that. And I said, why? He goes, turn to the left. I turn to the left, and I realize I'm on this bridge. And I look down, and this bridge is made of like some type of cement or marble. And I look down, and I see thousands and thousands and thousands of people, maybe even more, all standing like, shoulder to shoulder in these white pearlescent robes. And they're all looking up at both of us. And I'm like at shock, like, number one, where did all these people come from? Number two, who the heck are all these people, and why are they looking at us? And I look at him, I'm like, who are all these people? He goes, once again, I'm glad you asked. He goes, those are all the people You haven't met yet, you haven't influenced, and you haven't helped. With an instant, I had this flash of every single one of them and how there was a significance or an influence involved in their lives.
Yes.
And I was overwhelmed with this emotion and this sense, and I turned to him. I said, "Oh my God, I have to go back." He's like, "I know." And then I came back. I've met some of those people face to face, and they have recognized me from the bridge. They have named the bridge. I saw you on the bridge. So it's been amazing, but then the rest of the people, I still struggle with. Who are these people? How do what do I do, And I think that's been the struggle.
Yeah. So, thanks so much for sharing that, because, I'm chomping at the bit, because what you say resonates just so strongly with me. Just what a wonderful story. In today's society, people think that they have their small, little, meaningless lives, right? And that we suffer and we die and we have problems, remembering things or doing things. We beat ourselves up for not being smart enough, or, what difference would I make? But the thing is what was being told to you has also been told to many other people as well, including me, in different ways. Mm-hmm. And that is, we're part of a tapestry. To think about a tapestry, and this has been used frequently during near-death experiences. Okay. People see themselves as a thread in the tapestry. And each thread is connected with the whole tapestry. And if the tapestry was missing one thread, even though the tapestry is huge, it would be incomplete. It would be incomplete without you. And one thing we didn't have any time about consciousness is how it's so much expanded, that we are truly magnificent spiritual beings. Our brain is what Eben Alexander said is the reducing valve, and that's true. But yet our lives are so important here because we influence so many people beyond our awareness. So those people in the bridge who you say, well, I'm not sure how I influence them, you may never know until you pass away and see how you influence them, because what you do reverberates through the tapestry unseen. Even a very simple thing. Let's say you're walking down the street. You see a buddy who's looking glum, and you say, hello, how are you? I missed you, blah, 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 blah. That just simple action may change, brighten their day.
Right.
Now, you go home and you don't give it a second thought. But he may go home and he may be kinder to his wife, kinder to his children, and they in turn may be kinder to how they deal with work, or the children may be kinder at school to their fellow students, and those fellow students may be kinder, or what have you. And so this one little simple act reverberates down and down and down through cause and effect, far beyond what you see. And so with your radio show, you don't see how the words that you say influence people, because not only does it influence thousands of people, but they in turn influence so many people around them. Before you know it, millions of people have been impacted, and you never see it.
No, you're right. It's like the pebble in the pond. One little pebble drops into the pond, creates all these waves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what Erica McKenzie saw, going back to her near-death experience. She saw God hold a big rock, and it was brilliant light. And she said, Erica, you are that rock. And he says, I am. And he dropped the rock, and it went into a huge lake. And when the rock dropped, the ripples spread across the whole entire lake. So what you say is actually consistent with people's near-death experiences with God.
It's the ripple effect. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. So for your listeners out there, if I have any important messages, is that a couple messages. One, there's nothing to fear. People in near-death experiences don't fear death. In fact, they welcome it. They just know that they got to stay here, like you did. Like, oh, great, I'm back. I want to stay here. It's lovely. I want to go back to that cruel world. And that's people's experiences. They don't want to come back here. Yet isn't it ironic that people fear death so much?
I know.
That the existential anxiety causes them so much pain in life. So that's one thing, the fear. And the second thing is you are special to God. God loves you equally to everybody else. You are a magnificent spiritual being. You're a child, a daughter or son of God, heir to the kingdom of God. Each and one of us. In fact, you are an expression of God.
That's well said. Yeah, expression. Some people, they don't feel that way. In our language, we often say that, people fall into love, and there's some people that don't feel any love. They don't know what love is, and they feel, oh, nobody's going to love me. But you say in your book that people step into the love. What's the difference between falling in love or stepping into love?
Well, falling in love is very common in our language, and it's based on emotion. So, when you fall into love, you just go based on infatuation or a feeling. You step into love, you make a choice. So let's say you have this old lady trying to cross the street with some groceries, right? So stepping into love is, well, I'm busy, but, this lady needs me, and I'm going to help her do her groceries, right? So there's no feeling into it. You're not thinking, oh, versus, let's say a beautiful woman's crossing the street. Oh, she's very attractive. I want to meet her, or guy, or whatever. And so, you go help them with whatever. So one is falling into love, where the other is a choice, where you step into love, and you're not looking necessarily for any certain feeling or anything to get out of it, because true love, perfect love, is unconditional and need-free, is as God's love is, unconditional and need-free. So now, in the end, when we do this need-free, unconditional love, we end up being rewarded in so many ways we're unexpected, because our spirit rises and we start feeling peace, and then we start feeling love in our own lives as a byproduct. We feel repose, which is a dignifying peace even in the face of adversity. So these are the byproducts and consequences of need-free love. Mm-hmm. But it's so another paradox. It can't be our objective to get this. We need to love purely out of our heart, because we want to go beyond ourselves, beyond our own selfish nature, beyond our ego, to become the spiritual human and not the animal human.
I think that animal human has to play with this next question I have is, God is unconditional. Those that have had the near-death experiences, the out-of-body experiences, including myself, have felt that unconditional love. Yet many religions, like you state in your book, place human conditions onto God's love. Why do you think that is?
I don't, why do people anthropomorphize God as a human being? Maybe because they can't fathom what unconditional love is, because they've never seen it or felt it. Mm-hmm. So they sort of assume that God is like them. They say God has perfect love, but they don't really understand what that means. Also, you can look at other possible factors, such as controlling other people and putting fear in their lives to get compliance and so forth. But I really don't want to get into that, mire but I will tell you kind of the story regarding this. I was selling books, and it was kind of at a crystal sort of thing, which is not usually my usual place.
Right.
But,
I understand.
Right. But, I'm
it's more spiritual than the New Age. You're into the spiritual rather than the New Age. I understand.
Yeah. But I don't care who's interested in reading my things. I'm open to anybody. So I was selling here, and there was this evangelical Christian girl putting "You're going to hell" tracts in people's stuff, and cards and things. She came up to me and asked me if I believed that Jesus, I was saved by Jesus. And I said, yeah, I believe that, but I believe that Jesus saves all humanity and not just Christians. She says, well, I don't believe that, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, let me ask you something. If you had the opportunity to take your worst enemy and torture that enemy for eternity, would you do that? And she thought about it. She said, well, no, I probably wouldn't do that. I said, because you have too much love in your heart. And she kind of grudgingly nodded, kind of knowing where I was going with this, I think. And so I said, no, we both agree that God's love is perfect. She goes, yes. I said, well, if our love is immature compared to God's perfect love, and yet we have too much love to take our worst enemies to hell, how could God put the majority of humanity, throw them into hell for eternity, and torture them? How could God with perfect love do that?
Correct.
And she just sort of looked at me and sort of scuttled off. She didn't have an answer. So yes, that's true. People, of course, the wonderful thing about near-death experiences, what separates near-death experiences from religious expression. And I want to say, first of all, I remain a Christian in many ways. And, I have the most respect for all religions if it helps a person find God. But the difference is between near-death experience and other religions is that near-death experiences have a reliability that's unquestionable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's about 3 to 7% of people, based on surveys throughout the industrialized world mostly, people who've had near-death experiences. So let's take the average of 5%. In the United States alone, that would be 15 million people.
Wow.
Now, the Longs, to the Ndes website, took a sample of hundreds and did research on it. And although what they see is very culturally relevant, the underlying things, maybe the top 20 or whatever, underlying things that they measured are the same in near-death experiences regardless of a person's religion, culture, age, gender, nationality. It doesn't matter. I have a psychologist friend who's Iranian, and he's doing research on Shia Muslims in Iran. Their experiences are the same. Underlying of the basic elements are the same. So you can't get 3 people together randomly, select 3 people and talk about religion and then agree on it, right, typically. Now, imagine if you're in a jury and you say, well, somebody stole that television from there. Well, you got one witness, probably won't hold. Let's say 20 people said, yeah, I saw that guy steal that television. Jury may convict. Probably would, based on people saying, I saw the same thing. What if 1,000 people said, yep, saw that guy steal that television? No doubt the jury would decide that, yeah, that guy's guilty.
Right.
What if there was 15 million people say, I saw that guy do the television? There would be no question. The jury would say, it's unanimous. Right. We know it's true. And well, why don't people accept that with near-death experiences? And you don't find that with different religions. You got 30,000 different Christian churches alone, not all the other many religions in the world. So, but near-death experiences have this reliable validity that you can trust.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is like you stated, is like, people have their own opinions. Some people are afraid. They don't know. They're skeptic. They're agnostic, whatever the question may be. But besides people in their near-death experiences, some people go to heaven. Some people go kind of in between. And some people state that they go to hell. So there's a bit of a controversy there. But in your book, you state that there is a hell. So the question is, if God exhibits unconditional love to all beings, as you claim, how can anyone go to hell? And what is your interpretation of hell?
Well, thank you for that. That's a great question. People do have near-death experiences, and they experience the unconditional love of God. That is true. And so some people in near-death experiences say there can't be a hell. Yet others have hellish experience, a very small. Out of reading about 3,000 near-death experience off the Ndes website, I found maybe 10 that had hellish experiences. That's 0.33%. Although I think that's underreported because people who do have hellish experience are probably less likely to report them. But there are a far number more people who have positive near-death experiences than actually see hell from a distance, including George Ritchie, who had a very famous near-death experience during World War II. And he went down to hell with the various levels of the spiritual realm with Jesus. And when he went down to hell, he saw that people were engaging in all this repetitive behavior, violent, sexual, whatever, because there was no limitations on their behavior. And what was interesting to him was that there was nothing keeping them there. In fact, there were spiritual beings up there ready to take them up if they would only look up, but they chose not to. Howard Storm did choose. He had a very important book, My Descent into Death, where he had a brief hellish experience. And when he was having that experience, he prayed for deliverance, and Jesus came and delivered him.
Right.
And his hellish experience was over. So I want people to rethink hell in this way. And I can say this because I worked in prisons for 20 years with psychopaths. There are people, psychopaths, who have no ounce, I'm not saying Howard Storm is this way, but there are people who have no inkling of love in their heart. They reject God completely. They reject love completely. In fact, they relish with sadistic pleasure hurting other people.
Right. They're
so disruptive in society, we put them in prison. And even in prison, the worst ones, we have to take out of prison and put in a room by themselves, which they usually typically destroy, because they have so much anger and hatred in their heart. And they just relish destroying things. Now, can such a person who rejects God fully and love fully, how would they work in the spiritual realm? The oil and water.
Right.
So when we take ourselves from this earth and go to the spiritual realm, we take with us a choice. And again, we're going back to free will. God doesn't punish anybody. God doesn't reject anybody. We reject God. We reject heaven. And so those who have hell experiences, the people rejected God and heaven fully. And so they go to a neutral realm and outside of God, and then they create their own realm based on what's in their heart. And because there's a lot of evil there, right, they create a very hellish environment. But they can leave any time. Nothing's holding them there. It's not a punishment. It's a choice. They choose to be there. And they can't see beyond it.
You know, during a famous exorcist, Gabriel Morth, was doing an exorcism, Roman Catholic Church, and he says, I cast you out, demon, and send you, God has created a place for you in hell. And the demon laughed and says, hell? He says, God didn't create hell. He didn't even think of it. We created hell because we needed a place to go.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. And that is so true.
Yep.
That's exactly what NDEs are saying. So I think that's a very important point to bring up, because people do have difficulty reconciling the idea of hell and a loving God.
And like Eben Alexander talks about, as well as some others, is that we have to be careful of the chains we bind ourselves, as well as the attachments. And a lot of my spiritual communications with spirits that are stuck in between and stuck here is they lack the forgiveness, they lack the sense of love, mm-hmm, compassion, and they're stuck on some attachment that is a negative vibration or frequency or an emotion that keeps them here.
That's right.
It's important when we talk about free will that we've been given this free will. That's our choice. And some people will blame, says, well, God did this to me. Well, no, if you believe that, then you're actually causing that, but God would never do that to you. He's only a heartbeat away. He's only an emotion away, and that emotion is forgiveness, love, and whatnot.
Absolutely.
But if we move on to we talk about people that have crossed over, you note that many people have had near-death experiences, see a wide range of beings, including deceased pets, deceased family members, unknown spiritual beings, Jesus, God. What does this say about the overall structure of heaven?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of people who have near-death experiences know that there's a very complicated structure and hierarchy of beings. However, because there is a barrier for them to go further, oftentimes, they don't really see the specific intricacies of the structure. Now, there is some interesting work, from Dr. Newton, who did the book Journey of Souls, where people under hypnosis are reporting a little more about what the structure is like. But I can't speak a whole lot to that because that's kind of outside my realm of expertise. But he does bring some interesting ideas about there's this very complicated structure, which I think is true. I do believe, mm-hmm, that there are all sorts of levels of spiritual beings of various levels of love. And unfortunately, I've come also to the conclusion, based on my own experiences and so forth, that we're toddlers. That's why we're here on Earth. And Earth, by the way, a lot of NDErs say, is a very negative place, a dark place in the universe, even compared to many other planets. And but it's also an opportunity here on Earth to learn faster through the adversity, to grow. And that because we're toddlers in a sense spiritually, that and by no means that we're loved less. As expressions of God, we are loved equally. Just like a parent would love their toddler as much as their adolescent child. Just because a toddler reaches for the frosted cupcake and smears it all over his face, doesn't mean the parent loves that toddler less. The parent, hopefully, if it's a good parent, realizes that that toddler is just very immature in his developmental stage, as we are. But God is infinitely patient because God has infinity. So each soul is on their own journey. Some are going faster than others. For me personally, I hope to go on the fast track if I can, but others don't, and that's okay because there's all sorts of these possibilities of existence, which you started off talking about, your own experience. And that's very true according to near-death experiences. We're here to experience everything. And we have to experience everything to graduate. The analogy I give is when I was in graduate school, I had to take statistics. Well, I could take statistics the first year, or I could kind of blow it off for a few years. But before I graduated, I got to take statistics. I have to have that experience. And that's true with existence. So,
in your book, Psychology and Near-Death Experiences, you state that even though we're having our own individual experiences, we all have spiritual guides that are with us throughout our lives. Who are they? What is their purpose? And, how do these spiritual beings communicate with us?
Well, very good. Yeah. Most of the time when people have near-death experience and meet deceased loved ones, and even though we're grieving them, they're with us in a closer way than we'll ever realize. They're with us all the time. So grandma who passed away, who you love and miss, or mom or dad, are actually know us more intimately than when we were alive, but we don't always sense them as purely. So, most people don't experience spiritual beings in a very aware way. But doesn't mean they're not active. They work in our lives with a gentle nudge. And by the gentle nudge, they may come to us and steer us a certain way through a certain thought or feeling, things that we attribute to our own conscious. It says, our higher self is saying, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. People with near-death experiences sometimes say, well, that's actually our spiritual guides inserting a thought, in our own mind and our own voice. So we think it's ours. It's really them. They come to us in dreams sometimes. They come to us through an intuition or synchronicity, a person that you meet unexpectedly, or certain circumstances that bring you to a new level. A lot of this is below awareness. Now, there are some people, a very few people, who connect with spiritual beings more personally. And that can happen in a variety of ways. And a lot of people in near-death experiences can do this because they still have a foot in the other realm. So they can really, connection, as you said you did. And they sense their presence, they can communicate, and do many other things. So, but they're there. And people in near-death experiences says there's no doubt they're there. And I have no doubt they're there because, like you, I also experience them. So...
Yeah, it's amazing and it's a loving thing. And sometimes I've often wondered, and I shouldn't say I wonder anymore. I actually believe it now too, that not only are we getting this intuition and some of these messages from the loved ones on the other side or these guides, but sometimes it's our future self warning us because that event, that occurrence that is coming up or about to happen any moment has impacted our life so much that in the future we dwell on it and we wish we could have changed it. And we're sending that message and signal to our previous self to try to alter it, which once again is creating all possibilities for the Creator to experience.
Exactly. You can't put limitations on God or the influences. And there's different levels of guides. A lot of times our immediate deceased loved ones or helpers that we kind of experience most fully, but they have people they have to answer for. higher guides who are also our guides. And there's a hierarchy that goes up and up and up. And there is a lot of spiritual beings at various levels involved in all our lives, is what I believe.
Yeah, and it's an amazing thing. I mean, the one thing that I've noticed on the other side is when I've witnessed some colleagues and friends cross over, I've been very fortunate to have an eye, or I don't even like calling it an ability because we all have abilities, but a vision to see people cross over and that doorway when they cross and what they begin to experience as they enter the other side is all these souls are welcoming us, celebrating when we come home. Yeah. And it's people that we've forgotten while we're on this life, but when we go there, we remember, and it's even a variety of souls that just welcome us back home. So they're always rooting for us. They're cheering for us.
They really are. They really are. And they're not judgmental. I mean, you know, when we talk about consciousness and how it's expanded, one of the many ways it's expanded up there is that spiritual beings communicate with each other purely, knowing purely. So with expanded consciousness, really what you're talking about is we're in the interconnection of everything. We're within the fabric of the universe. So as a blob of energy, we don't have eyes or ears. So if you want to know something, like say you see a tree, to see it, you don't see it through like we do here on Earth. You see it by knowing it, by becoming it. And that's true with any in the universe. You can expand as far and contract as small as you want. You can have any knowledge put to you and so forth and so on. And so you're just this amazing spiritual being, and you can have all this cacophony of different spiritual beings talking to you, and you understand it all at once. And you know it purely. And we know each other purely. And here on Earth, you know, we feel so separated and so alone. But reality, we got a whole host of beings who know us fully. They don't judge us because they've been there too. They understand why we're doing things fully, and you know, and they are plugged into the love, so they love us unconditionally without judgment. And so, you know, when you talk about beings rooting for us, they're truly rooting for us to succeed in life, to learn, and to advance. And the fun thing about it is that we get to flip roles. When we pass away, maybe some of those ones will come down, and we'll be guides for them.
You know, very well said. You know, we're down to the last minute here, and I want to ask you this question. You've talked about, you know, ways for us to connect, you know, through mindfulness, thinking, you know, meditation, intuition, really focusing on our integrity so we can elevate ourselves spiritually. Yeah. But we're in such a world where there are so many distractions. And, you know, you talk about the harmful influences of television and social media in the modern age. And I'll give you an example is, you know, I saw 2 posts yesterday of this guy is killing this bear and videotaping it with a spear and trying to be this egocentric person, like, look what I did. And I was disgusted. And then I saw, of course, we've got the dog meat festival that goes on in another country. And I was seeing these videos of what was done to this dog, and I lost it emotionally. I was angry. I was upset. And Roy, I didn't sleep all night. I was up all night long, tossing and turning till 7 o'clock this morning. And then I fell asleep for a little bit, and then I had to take a nap until about noon. And I couldn't get it out of my head. I was so disgusted, and I was saying to God, why? Why are people like this? How can they do this? It's such evil. It's so... And I felt the emotion of what these animals did. And a part of me is like, I am disgusted to be considered a human being when I see other human beings do that.
Yes.
Do you believe that there's a connection between these distractions and serving God?
Oh, absolutely. You know, maybe we can talk in the future about the global spiritual revolution that's just starting right now. So I don't want to get into that because that's such a complicated thing. But I would say this. I like to quote Jesus from the Gospel of Thomas, which is not in the Bible. Jesus said, be passerby. Two-word verse, if you will. And what that means is to be in this earth as if you were a visitor. Not to be not part of it, like to meditate and escape it, but to be part of it, influence it, but yet be as a visitor, to not be attached to any of this stuff that the world covets so much. All this ego and violence and things like this. So my recommendation to your listener is to be passerby, to live your life according to your mission, because that's what's important. This earth is nothing. It's just a blip in time. Your home is in heaven. Be consistent with that. Don't be part of the craziness on earth and all the violent things like killing a bear. That's just not who you are. That's not the real within. You need to get in touch with your spiritual side, your God side, your true self, and be passerby with the rest of it.
Thank you, and I take that advice personally as well, so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
You've got your website, neardeathexperiencepsych.com, and let me spell this for everybody. It's www.neardeath, neardeathexpsy.com. And they can also get your book, Psychology in Near-Death Experiences, Searching for God. Now, is this available on Amazon?
It is. It's available on Amazon, paperback, Kindle, also on Apple iTunes, as well as barnesandnobles.com. And you can go to my website and click it there, too.
Fantastic. And also, everyone listening, check out his website. You can also go to his Facebook, which his tag on his Facebook is author Roy L. Hill. And you can also follow him on Twitter, which I'll be retweeting that this evening, is Near Death EXPY PSY.
Thank you very much.
You are so welcome. Any final words, Roy, to the listeners?
Well, first of all, I want to say I have a second book coming out called Jesus in Near-Death Experience, and that should be coming up before Christmas, and nobody's written about that before.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I'm excited about it. It's something very new. But I just want to reiterate, go without fear. Go in love. Know love, that you are loved. You're in love. Be love. And if you do that forevermore, you will never know different.
Thank you very much, Roy.
All right. Thank you.
This is Chris Fleming and Roy Hill. Thanks for listening to this month's edition of Spirit Talk.